everywhere. GBS.
Ama kwa hakika karibu katika GBS TV Jumatatu. Mimi naitwa Ivan Kibe, na kwanza naomba niwie radhi kwa kuchelewesha awamu hii kwa dakika 14, lakini tuwaseme ya kwamba afadhali kuchelewa lakini kukosa kufika. Na leo ni Jumatatu ambayo tutakuwa tunazungumzia masuala mengi kuhusu mazingira. Tunajua kwamba mvua kubwa inatarajiwa kushuhudiwa kuanzia hii leo. Wizara ya Anga ilikuwa imesema kwamba kutakuwa kuna shuhudia mvua kubwa ya El Nino, na ndio maana siku ya leo tutakuwa tunazungumzia swala hili asubuhi. Ndani ya studio niko naye mwenyekiti wa kamati wa mazingira katika kaunti ya Nairobi, ambaye si mwingine anafahamika kama Nasra, na singetaka kupoteza wakati, ningetaka nimweke ndani ili iweze kusikia sauti yake. Good morning, Mheshimiwa.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm very fine.
Pleasure to be here, and I'm looking forward to an exciting conversation.
So I want to say thank you for your moment this morning, even for giving us this moment to share with us the more about environment. And maybe we are aware that, Mheshimiwa, from today going forward, we are expecting a heavy downfall. Maybe what is your take?
So yeah, of course, thank you so much for your question. Yes, we have El Nino, and it's going to be something that will affect us in many ways. I think one of the things we should expect is flooding and a lot of disruption. And that's because of course, climate change being a key factor that will also amplify the effects of El Nino. So for us, I think the best thing is to make sure as a government, we are well prepared in assisting citizens navigate the space, by cleaning the drainages that you would have seen Nairobi County trucks and staff going around to clean drains, and that's in preparation of this particular season.
Maybe we could wish to start from this scratch. We are talking about climate change, and a few 2 months ago we had a conference that conferred leaders from different countries. Are we having serious on these issues of climate change?
Yes, I think we are very serious. And in part, let me begin with why the Africa Climate Summit, which was hosted between the 4th and the 6th September, along with the Africa Climate Week, hosted between the 4th and 8th, was very important for Africa. One, it gave Africa a platform to have the African voice, uniting the African voice in talking about African problems and how Africans can then be part of that conversation and driving those solutions from an Africa perspective. So we are serious because now we have a regional position that I'm hoping then will start the build-up as we talk about COP28 later this year, to also guide us from a perspective of what are we negotiating for when we're talking about serving our citizens from issues like drought, housing, and other things that come as a result of climate change. Yeah.
Maybe we can look some of the factors contributed by climate change. In other countries, people are saying that they are going hungry. But in Kenya, can we say yes, in as much that we're talking about the climate change, can we say that even as Kenyans, as the leaders, somewhere we have failed?
No, definitely. I think as leaders, we've failed in many ways, and I'll give you an example. So, over a number of years, our forest cover or our tree cover has, declined. And so in that regard, leaders, we've been either elected or nominated to represent and protect the interests of our citizens. So this decline is also a reflection of the fact that in the past, this was not prioritized. But I think all is not lost, because I think now there's a realization that probably was not there previously, that it is important for us as custodians of the citizens' rights to ensure that we're protecting the resources we have as a country, and the resources that are available in cities and spaces that protect not just the environment, but also the communities that depend on it. So a lot more to do, but I think there's generally a sense of people waking up to this fact. Yeah.
We can't talk about the climate change, then if we talk about environment. Where did the land start to beat us?
I think for me, I would say, again, it goes back to our forest cover. I think we had a lot of logging issues, for example. And I think we went from one extreme to the other. So we started off by not having measures in place. So that created a vacuum or a gap for people to abuse it. So the thing is, when there are gaps, there's going to be a lot of abuse, because people are seeing this as an opportunity of making money. And making money in and of itself is not a bad thing, but it needs to be mindful of the communities and of the environment. So you have to be balanced. So you're balancing your profit, you're balancing the people that depend on what you're doing, and the people who rely on this, and of course, the planet as a whole. So I think we lost track when we thought profit cannot be balanced. And I think now we're recalibrating, and the other side of that coin is rapid restriction of business, because we're trying to protect the environment. So we have to almost make sure that we're balanced, both when it comes to protecting and preserving, and also giving leeway to growth of business. Yeah.
Environment is key to our country. Bear in mind that we see that Kenya is an agricultural country, but where is this disconnect that being an agricultural country, now we are complaining or we are crying that we're being affected in terms of environment issues? We have not tackled them well. Where do we lose from the beginning?
Okay, so I'll speak from the perspective...
And maybe, sorry for this,
yeah.
Can we still maintain that Kenya is an agricultural country?
Well, I think what we can say is we are traditionally an agricultural economy, but now we're realizing that we also have other strengths. My recommendation is we do not move away from agriculture, because that is what is our base. In fact, what we need to do is to strengthen our base as we complement it with other sectors. And I think that's where we went wrong. We kind of got excited by the shiny new objects and then neglected agriculture. I think for me, that's the first point where we went wrong. So I would, if I could, I would recommend that, number one, we need to reestablish all the avenues that would make us an agricultural stronghold. That means better working conditions for farmers and labor within, plantations or farming spaces. And also, let's look at the supply chain, where the issue is rampant. Because I think what happens is, if we make it so hard, then there'll be cost cutting, which then affects the quality of the produce, the quality of how we farm our food or other cash crops as well. And then separately, I think the other thing is, I mentioned that we got distracted by shiny new objects. Think IT, think, the financial, yes, exactly. For me, I'll speak from a built environment perspective, because that's, if you like, my specialty. With Africa, we will have 1.4 billion people by, I think, 2030 or 2050. And so where we're going wrong is we have a growing population. So there's rapid urbanization in Africa, and a young population at that, comprising of young people who are looking to cities as a source of opportunity, new opportunities for a better sense of life, which is completely fine. So what we need to be mindful of is there's rapid urbanization, but it needs to be well planned sustainable, and in a way that does not burden existing infrastructure. Because that's where we are just cutting down trees left, right, and center in cities. We're also not looking at, for example, where there used to be a single dwelling home, and we've just broke it down to create this multi-story building. What's happening to the sewage systems? So there's rapid urbanization, but we're not thinking about everything in totality. And I think agriculture needs to be strengthened, but as we grow in population, we need to now see how's that affecting everything else. Yeah.
I like your conversation this morning, but who to start this conversation?
I think we have a multi-layered approach. So I think at a county level, we need to look at the role of the built environment. And that will involve both the planning department at the county government. It will involve, of course, the governors. I think in the past, we've decided we are devolving, but there's almost like a murky space where national government and county government are not so clear on their role in driving this. My take would be the national government should set the strategy for what we want to do as Kenya, and then the county government, having that localized feel for their people, should then now look at the implementation in the unique spaces at county.
Maybe as an environmental expert, do you feel that the county government were able to, maybe were responsible for the environment issues?
I think perhaps, well, I don't know if I would say they are responsible, but I would say that they have not been utilized at 100% capacity. They have direct access to citizens by virtue of having that structure with county. So they need to be more involved and more proactive in driving change at the ward level, and their zones within a county. Illegal dumping, for example, and waste management is a huge issue in Nairobi. And this should involve both county and NEMA working together, because if we don't, then we have a huge problem in our hands.
On the same, Mheshimiwa, I don't know what always comes to mind that when we talk about the county government in terms of environment, the only action and the mitigative response that most of Kenyans experience is county government coming to clean up the drainage system, clearing the bushes. Is that the core mandate of the county government? It's just a perception to the people. Then when you talk about the county government and environment, like now, we have this, the governor, Sakaja flagship, that is cleaning the environment. You see, it's just opening the drainage system and clearing the bush. And then we see that now that is done, we have responded to environment issues.
No, so my take is no. That's a very limiting way of approaching environmental.
No, I'm saying it's just a perception to the people outside.
Yeah. So So no, you're right, and I would just like to point out that that is not the only thing that happens within a space, or should happen within a space from a government perspective. So cleaning up is one avenue, right? So you're mitigating, but how do you create spaces within a community? And for me, I look at the informal settlements as a huge opportunity and game changer for the climate conversation, because one of the things that I would be curious to know, for example, is waste issues in informal settlements. That could actually turn into an opportunity from waste to power, or waste to energy, or waste to water, so that essentially this waste becomes wealth for those communities. And that's something I think that has not yet been tapped into at a county government level. That should be.
Okay, thank you. I was trying to look some of the, when talking about the climate change and the response to the, in both national and the county government, I remember that during COVID-19, during the conference, that the summit.
Yeah.
I think the amount of billion, were to shared among the counties. I'm not sure whether it's 3 or 7 billion, but there are 7 for the budget of the annual, that's the 2023-2024 for climate change response, and then out of the summit that we had 1 month ago or 2 months ago, it was another added of, I think, 7 or 3. So amount is 11 billion. Do you feel that as a county, we will be able to account that money?
So it's really interesting that you brought that up, because just the other day, we've been reviewing the climate change management bill as the Nairobi County. And the question that I posed to the department under climate change is, so how much money do you need to be effective in implementing your role for purposes climate change? And so under, I think, I'm trying to remember the law, but it says a minimum of 2% of the budget should be directed to...
minimum of?
2%.
2%.
Right. So I said, but you saying a minimum of 2% is not letting me know how much do you need, because there's a minimum provided under the law, which is fine. But what do you need? I think our challenge is that we need to be very clear. We want to do 1, 2, 3. 1 requires X amount, 2 requires Y amount, and 3 requires Z amount. Because until we're very clear on the things that we want to do and the money required for each, we won't be able to tell whether the 4 billion is enough or is it a lot more. And I feel like, yes, for me, on the outset, 4 billion is good money to make great change. We will only be able to know whether it's excessive or a little if we now measure it with what we are trying to achieve. And I think, for me, I feel in Kenya and a lot of developing countries, and just generally from a business model perspective, what I find interesting is we run towards sourcing for money first. I think that's the wrong approach. We need to say, this is what we want to do, this is how long it might take, and this is the money we need. Because that way then, when you're sourcing for money, you're very targeted in your approach because you know what you want to do. Rather than having a figure and then trying to fit in programs to fit into that figure. I think that's a little backwards. And I think that's actually our challenge. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So we now come to Nairobi County.
Yeah.
I don't know how much has been said for climate change, maybe in this year. But do you feel that there is a disconnect between the county officials and now the county environment who are working at a grassroots level? I
think there is. To answer you simply, I think there is. And I think in part the reason for this is there's a lot that is rapidly changing on the ground. Before, grassroots organizations used to literally beg, please help us, we want to clean. Please help us, we want to plant. Now it's changed. Now government is being told by development partners, you need to. Now it's government which is going to the grassroots and asking them, let's work together. And so the nature of the game has changed. The nature of the interaction has changed. And I think what government needs to be very clear on is, what are we trying to achieve so that when we're working with the grassroots organizations, we also know who we are working with. So that there is a gap that I'm hoping with this climate change bill that we're discussing and going through a second reading shortly, that will then be able to create that space. And then second, then allow those relationships to be more intentional and systematic. They might be intentional now, but I don't think they're adequately systematic. That's the gap. And then in terms of, you talked about the budget, that's what we're working on now as we talk about the climate change management bill. Yeah.
Climate change and urban centers. When you come to Nairobi, you find that we are having a lot of company industrialization. We are bringing more companies. Do we have laws that regulate on how the emissions has been regulated in our county level, at our county level? Bear in mind we have Nairobi border, Kiambu County. When you go to Nairobi County, you find a lot of new companies that are coming. You go to Machakos, you find there are a lot of companies that are Kajiado at the same time. It means that the Nairobi might have the same problem in terms to climate change as compared to Kiambu, Kajiado, and Machakos.
Yeah.
Do you have policies that might regulate the emissions of these gases?
So that's a very good question. So I'll start off by saying that we have a national building code, which was created all the way in 1960. And it's been a journey because, they've been asking for comments. So you can imagine since 1960, comments have been asked for, but it's yet to change. And so what we're, lobbying for, both in my capacity as a legislator and also as a built environment professional, is to ask fundamentally, now there's a lot that's changed. We need to make sure that this building code also makes provision for sustainability. So it means building with potentially locally available materials or low carbon materials. So as you build, are you building in a way that is also not affecting the environment? Second, in terms of legislation, we do have a number of legislations, but we're also working towards complementing these legislations with green building guidelines. What does this mean? When you talk about green buildings, you're trying to build in a way that is mindful of the energy. So you want to have energy efficient buildings. You want to have buildings which provide for natural light and ventilation. You also want to build in a way that ensures it's water efficient and waste efficient. If you take those green building principles in practice and then create measures where you will not get an approval if you've not complied with a few things, then that encourages. My challenge has been, we have so many laws, but the implementation part is what has been the challenge. Last year, there was a motion that I pushed for collapsed buildings. And one of the things we realized when, just looking at this industry is, often these buildings did not have qualified personnel to confirm that the structure is safe to occupy. And that means then, on ground, we might have beautiful pieces of paper, but on ground, there's a challenge. Whether it's capacity from county level or shortcuts from an integrity level, that's something that we need to unpack. But yeah.
Okay, thank you. On the same,
yeah.
And this is the question of conveniency. Those industries that are coming, they are saying that we want to create an employment for our youths.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we have to look, even if we are creating an employment, which risks are coming, which are these harmful effects are coming from those industries. And now my question begs, should we go for convenience? Let's come up with this industry as long as now we are creating an employment for our youth. And now the question is how much and how sustainable those jobs?
I think, okay, that's a very good question. I think number one, whether we're expanding, whether we're growing, we need to do it in a manner that is mindful of the local population. One of the things that I find interesting about the climate conversation in Africa is that it heavily copies the Global North's version, which I think is not going to work for us. Why? Because in Africa, we also have a lot of manual labor and informal labor that goes into the mix. So why can't these then be converted to green manual labor? Because I think climate change jobs should not just be blue-collar jobs. I think the same people who are working, whether it's cleaning roads or helping with picking tea, in a farm, they could still be actually green tea pickers, green informal jobs that provide, for this transition. And what that means then is you're not locking out 60% of Nairobi's population from accessing these opportunities. And also, as we grow, we cannot grow if we leave people behind. They could still be actually informal jobs that provide, for this transition. And what that means then is you're not locking out.
Today on the show, we are going to talk about the new generation in marriage.
For me, I will talk about marriage as an institution.
Are we getting married or are we signing contracts?
Once you leave, you can agree in many things. You sit down and agree, this is what we want to do.
If you want to get married, don't do a wedding.
Isn't that one way of showing how much you love me?
It is God who will give you the best husband.
Many women or many men, they are in marriage because of themselves.
We are going to discuss about cancer awareness.
In the year 2020, during Corona time. That is when I received this, can I call it bad news or good news?
Did it at one point hit in your mind that this can be cancer?
It does not mean that whether, even if you have a tumor in your breast, it can be cancer. So after that, akasema, immediately we are going to start treatment. I heard my sister crying behind the phone now. She cried for about 20 minutes. We have the doctor's report. What about God?
God's report,
Mungu anasema aje?
I think you can't afford to miss this topic.
Everywhere, GBS.
Na mtazamaji wangu wa GBS TV, tunatoka break fupi na tukuomba utuwie radhi kwa hitilafu za kimitambo. Karibu tena mheshimiwa, welcome back. We are addressing the issues of allowing a lot of companies, sometimes we don't know whether they are being regulated to match with what the Constitution says in terms of regulations of those gases and emissions. But we are allowing a lot of them for convenience purpose that we are creating an employment. So I was asking, should we go for employment or should we maintain what we have already?
So I think this is a very layered question. So one, of course, we would want investment to come into the country or the city. So that's important. But it should not be at the expense of, and I think, personally, I feel we can do both. We can ensure that we have a due diligence conducted, when these investors are coming in, to ensure that as they're coming in to create opportunities, but they're not harming our communities or our environment. And I think, in part, the challenge has been that there's almost been a scarcity mindset that doing the right thing means it costs you. And I think if we have that mindset shift that these are people who are coming in, but even as they come in, they need to respect the laws of the country that they're coming into. And they also need to be mindful of the communities that they will be working for, because any investor who comes into this country or any entity that comes into a city is essentially creating an opportunity for itself, which is okay, but it's also creating an opportunity for the country and the citizens who depend on that. So it's mutually, it should be a mutually respectful arrangement. So yes, invite investment, but also ensure that it complies with local laws to ensure also communities and the environment are protected.
Okay, thank you. As we continue the conversation, I found that we are still going to your area of operation. And somebody is saying, allow now me to start receiving some questions from those who are watching us from different parts, and especially those who are following us via YouTube and other social media sites. Okay, somebody is asking, earlier on we had
Yeah.
organic farming, which was sustainable. But now we have what we are saying, the green revolution, with that need the fertilizer and all those. But where are we safe?
So I think it's a very valid question. So I think my question would be, so I'm not, a farmer, but I will answer it this way. We had organic farming and that was working and in a way that was not harmful to the health of the communities. My question would be, as we're doing this green revolution in farming, the question I would highlight is whether these measures are helping potentially the output of the produce or the process. And if they do, then the question would be, is it enhancing farming in a way that helps the process and communities? If so, then that would justify why we're moving away from traditional and complementing it with a modern method. If not, then perhaps what is driving this revolution is either revenue or output, because sometimes from a government perspective, or even a business perspective, if maybe in traditional methods they could produce 60 apples, and with these new ones they're doing 100 apples, they're focusing more on the output. So I think the concern for me would be, is there a health risk? Because anything that you're injecting into the earth, is it creating potentially an opportunity for maybe diseases? Because that's the only concern I would have. But if it's just enhancing things, then I don't think it's an issue to improve ourselves over time. Yeah.
When talking about the green revolution, we understand that we are using some chemicals or some technology.
Yeah.
Now we are talking about the climate change. Do we considering that some of these technology that we are using, this fertilizer that we are using, does it have any effect to our climate?
And that's what I think I just answered. Essentially, I would be mindful to understand what these fertilizers do, because in the context of what they do, is it just to speed up the process of production? And then if that's the answer to that question is yes, then I would want to understand, for speeding up the process, what's the cost to us? Cost to us could be our health. So if there's a side effect, potential side effect to that, then I would want to understand what led to that decision and by who. Because often these questions are not black and white. There's a lot here. Government is thinking of production so that they can have exports. Businesses are thinking about profit. But have they considered the human aspect of this? Because if there is health issues that could be tied to this, then it needs to have advocates like myself, like you, then raising these concerns to government as well.
Okay, thank you. On the same, we had some case that was presented in the court concerning the GMOs, and I found that I think last week the determination of the case was made.
Yeah.
And where maybe the petitioner lost the case. Do we have grounds, or we as members of Account Assembly, and especially those under the docket of environments, do we have concern of what the petitioner was going for?
So I, unfortunately, am not aware of the facts of this case, so I can't speak on potentially what was driving, what was motivating the petitioner. But insofar as being a representative of the people, if a petition is brought to me, for example, as a member of County Assembly that has merit, then we would then be in a position to lobby and represent the people's views to drive the same. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I would wish to go to environment and policies and politics. Mheshimiwa, when you go at a grassroots level, what do you hear people say talk about the environment, our response to our environment when you go to meet your people?
So I think what is interesting is that, so I find that there are largely two, or rather three groups of people. So there's the first group which thinks this environment and climate change conversation is a hoax. It's true. They're there. And I don't blame them, because also you need to understand that potentially they're coming from a perspective that Is it real, or is it what the government is using to look good in front of foreigners?
Yes.
So I understand that. That skepticism is grounded in something they believe in. But I would also invite them to say, or rather take a step back to assess the second layer of it. Is there rising pollution in cities like Nairobi? Yes. Is it affecting quality of life? Yes. Now more than ever, we have rising cases of respiratory issues. That's one. Two, when you look at waste management, on the ground, if you go to Mlango Kubwa or other areas like Huruma, one of the key things that I'm seeing affecting communities is because of the waste dumping, kids are getting sick. And in turn, this affects also the soil quality and a bunch of other things. That's another thing. So it's real. So those communities who are affected that way see it. They actually see how it's affecting them in a negative way. And the third, I would say, are professionals. So they're very theoretic in how they see climate change. But we need all three, because I think the skeptics, what they do is they ground us. Because you might be romantic and thinking climate change is how we save the world. They'll tell you, nah, that's not true. It's good, because that's the person who gives you pushback. People on the ground might not have the words of articulating certain things from a policy perspective, but they can tell you how they're affected. With pollution, with no tree cover, our weather is changing rapidly. It's either really cold or really hot. And that's unfortunate, because the weather that we used to enjoy is now rapidly changing. And lastly, with respect to the professionals, it's important because climate change is also an opportunity for us to unlock green jobs, better cities, better well-planned cities, and also attract green financing for Kenya and counties as well.
I like the fact that you have talked about the waste management. And when you're talking about waste management, there is this aspect of garbage collection from all its 5 wards. But now, who benefits from? We see that we are giving you those jobs, but initially, who are the biggest beneficiary of those garbage collection?
So I think I can only speak for what I know. Initially, it was really murky, and I think even, for example, in Dandora, one of the key things was even the waste was a form of control, and there were cartels. Apparently, and this is something I only found out once I joined the assembly, waste, garbage is huge business. And now with the governor fighting to ensure youth are part of the equation, it's slowly changing, but that's not to say that garbage in itself and garbage collection isn't big business. That was largely controlled by, of course, government is doing its part, but separately you have on the ground businesses who really took advantage of that situation to now be restrictive and also now impose control over communities. And I'm hoping that this changes. But essentially, it was a blend of cartels, the government, and some private businesses.
Okay, thank you. On the same, what are we doing? Or do we see that we just take the revolving on the same issues? Everybody talks about cartels. I don't know what are these cartels, but what should be the end result?
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to speak on this from my capacity and training as a lawyer and also as the chairperson of the Delegated County Legislation Committee. The first thing I noticed with respect to Nairobi County is that since 2013, we're lacking in regulations. We shy away from laws, and I'm not clear on why there's a hesitation around regulations in particular. Because with written regulations, then there'll be systems in place which are clear and defined on whose role is what and what are the consequences if this is not done. I think the first step is to ensure that there are regulations. The second is we need to have transparency. The government, both from an executive perspective and an assembly perspective, needs to be very transparent on the challenges and the status of the situation on ground. Because that's how citizens are then empowered to hold the government accountable. I think that secrecy needs to be gone away from, and we move towards a more open dialogue. And I think that can only happen if we enhance key stakeholder engagement. And third, I think there needs to be collaboration between the private sector and the government and the communities, because government can set an agenda, but it might not have the capacity to upscale. Communities might have solutions, but there's a disconnect between them and government. Sometimes that means then the neutral party is the private sector, because they have capacity, they have expertise, and they're a neutral collaborator for both parties. So they can actually help us coordinate a response that is beneficial for the government's agenda, but also for the communities that depend on these resources.
Okay, thank you. Now let's go now to the real issues. We are seeing that we are expecting from today the heavy downfall. And I had asked earlier on what or where were the preparation of the county government of Nairobi. We know that Nairobi County sometimes has been a challenge when there is a heavy downfall. This time, what do we expect, and what hope can we have for your people as a leader?
So I can speak only from an assembly perspective. What I have seen, though, is that, as I earlier mentioned, is I've seen Nairobi City County staff, unclog the drains around the city. That's one thing that I've seen. I also can say that now, as a member of the Environment Committee, we're pushing for the climate change management bill to be passed. Why is this important? The bill provides 3 measures that can assist, management, even when it comes to disasters related to climate. One is it establishes a climate change fund, which then would house the funds that would help the county assist, mitigate, and also from an adaptation perspective, these challenges, including El Nino. And then it also provides for a steering committee and also involves the community at a larger scale to see what climate action plans look like at a county level, and how then the community or representative from different aspects of the community can be part of this process, and their voice can then assist on how these climate change plans and how these funds are utilized. So this is super important, because from a long-term perspective, then it's not a panic kind of reaction each time we know El Nino is coming and we're trying to look for donors or sponsors to help us attack it. And lastly, I think from a national perspective, I understand that there are initiatives revolving around the different environmental bodies, such as the Ministry of Environment, NEMA, in collaboration with counties to see how this can be mitigated. And I also understand from a private sector perspective, the Red Cross is undertaking certain initiatives. I'm not clear on the scale or the breakdown of the same, but yeah, that's so far what I know.
Okay. On the same, sometimes I heard them talk about the disaster management fund. And sometimes the only way that fund can be utilized is when we have such disasters. So I don't know, as per now, what was the preparation?
So unfortunately, I'm not clear on what the executive is doing in that regard, because that's mainly an executive function. But I do know that what the climate change management bill is moving the approach from reactive to proactive. So right now, you're right, the disaster management fund means we have to wait for a disaster to take place, then for us to manage. And I think it's a very, I don't think it's the best way of doing it, because it means people need to be affected for you to utilize funds. Whereas I think the correct approach would be, you need to be proactive in preparing, not waiting for a disaster to strike for then you to respond, because harm should not be the basis of you doing your job. Yeah.
Thank you, Muhesh, for that. And sometimes leaders have these tendency of telling the community, move to the safe ground. And now the question is, where is this safe ground?
It's super interesting that you say that. And I think it's a very privileged way of talking, to be honest. People, communities don't have the luxury of moving, right? And I think you know, myself included, we need to do better in saying, with our people being where they are, how can we help them and meet them where they are with a solution? Not to tell them to move, because in my opinion, that's not a logical way of addressing things.
It's not practical, doable.
Yeah.
So on the same, there is an issue of, for the past 1 year, Mheshimiwa, you agree with me, there's been an issue that is more, that has been dangerous more than that, and you know, that will come maybe for 6 months, for 3 years, or for 3 months. We don't know how long maybe it might be anticipated to be. But I don't know whether you are aware, Mheshimiwa, that there are people in slums who are sleeping hungry. Is that not another form of El Nino?
Yeah, and food security is actually a very, very big issue in a lot more in urban settlements, unfortunately, urban spaces, because you find a lot of people, young and old, leave, whether it's the village or, you know, a more rural setting, to come to the cities, expecting that when they come here, life is better for them. Unfortunately, the reality is different, because life is more expensive here than even in, right? So they are then faced with not just food security, but housing security as well. And it is a problem, a huge problem. I can't tell you the measures that the executive have, but I can tell you what I intend to do as myself.
Maybe you can tell us.
So just to give you a context, I'm a special elect MCA at the Nairobi County Government, Nairobi City County Assembly. So one of the things that I intend to do kicking off in 2024 is to have micro grants for women, youth, and minorities to help them see what they can do to help themselves. These micro grants are not big, but what they will help with is to nudge you and give you breathing room as you start off any enterprise. And they're particularly targeted to the mama mbogas and very, very micro enterprises. That's one. Because I don't think we should be in a situation where we're constantly giving handouts. We want to make sure that citizens are empowered to do something for themselves. But second, and of immediate need, is of course the food security issue. In that regard, one of the things that I intend to do next year is to roll out a food drive. Hopefully, where resources allow, it would be monthly, but the intention is to start at a quarterly capacity to ensure that no one goes to sleep hungry. It's really hard, because if you think about it, if I don't have food on the table to eat, how am I thinking of building a green Kenya? I'm not even thinking of Kenya. I'm thinking about the next meal, right? So there's no way we can thrive as a country if we don't have people who have their necessities met, and that's food, shelter, and security, safety. I think there's a lot to do, and so on my part, that's what I intend to do.
Maybe in case there might be now the heavy downfall, who might be probably affected most?
Definitely people in informal settlements, because they don't have the sturdy structures that would protect them. You find with any, the danger of any heavy downpour is that if a structure is not solid, then there's potential for it to be swept away. And these are then communities who will be really affected by this.
Mheshimiwa, you do a champion for sustainability.
Yes.
And focus on urban agenda. Maybe share with us in 2 minutes about it.
Great. In my hat as the CEO of the Kenya Green Building Society, one of the things that we're trying to do is to push for sustainable and green cities. That means what we're trying to look at is social housing. I'm foreseeing a space, an avenue of working with the government on affordable housing. What is affordable is something that is subjective at the moment. What is deemed affordable is still not so affordable to many Kenyans, right? So one of the things we're doing is working with the county government, with the national government or the Ministry of Housing to see how we can redefine affordable housing. That's one. Two, with informal settlements, which now we intend to look at as a key focus area, we're trying to see how we can create these spaces as green spaces for children. Because what we saw is, with these cities, now children don't have spaces to play. Who are most affected? Kids from mid to low income households. So we're hoping that slowly but surely, informal settlements can now start moving towards a life of dignity. And lastly, we're pushing to see if we can have policies in place that can ensure as we build, we're building in a way that is mindful of the environment, the people, and the energy resources that we're trying to do. So far, we've pushed and worked with Laikipia County, Homa Bay County, and Nairobi County. We're trying to see if we can get the governor's office certified as a green government building. It'll be the first in Africa, if not the world. And the aim for doing this is simple. I'm really trying to make people understand that as you build, whether it's in the informal area or a corporate area, be mindful of how you build. There are people who occupy those spaces. Their health matters. Also, separately, if you build correctly, you could, as a developer, attract investment partners, because now investors are not just looking at making money, they're also looking at how money is made. And anything that has a consideration for environment and social means they also look at you as a potential partner to do business with. And I'm trying to convince the government, don't look at people as a cost, look at people as a resource. If you build for people, you actually create an opportunity for you to attract investment that is mindful of people. And so it's a journey, it's ongoing. And the last one that we're trying to really work towards is building climate resilience for the urban poor. So can we give them better solutions for waste management on ground? And it's a journey, but hoping in the next few months that materializes into a few good outcomes.
Mheshimiwa, one of your beneficiaries in your program, they are women and youths. Maybe what can you single them out as compared to what the government is also doing to women? Because if you look, the government is also saying that our agenda is to improve the livelihood of women and youths, but when you go to the grassroots, you find there's nothing tangible that has been done. Maybe what effort have you done, have you put to make sure at least?
Yeah. So one, in my own capacity, one of the things I've tried to do is wherever there's job opportunities, when I do get CVs from the youth, I try to ensure that they get an opportunity, even if it's just an unpaid internship. Because one of the things that I realize sometimes is companies say, we could hire you, but we could hire you if you have experience. So I try to tell the youth, sometimes take the bullet, the initial one, do it as an internship. Even if it's unpaid, it gets you the experience so that tomorrow, with your CV, you have something to show for it. Because that is sometimes something that locks you out of an opportunity. With respect to women, I talked about in 2024, my aim is to start a micro grant for women. And potentially also, I want to target in particular, not just women, but disadvantaged women, especially from minority groups. Because I think sometimes the challenge is also we have layers of discrimination. So there could be gender. It could be also minorities in the context of differently abled communities as well. And so you mentioned correctly that there's a disconnect between the community and what the government is doing. What I actually used a lot of my time in the first year understanding the gaps, because I did not want to come up with something which is almost a repeat of what the government is doing. So the micro grant for women is my initiative to see how then I can target specific women from a community. So gender is one of the aspects of discrimination, but there's a lot more. There's minorities, people who don't feature anywhere, whether it's in companies or even from a perspective that they're differently abled. That then creates room for impact. And through these micro grants, then hopefully get them started to being self-sufficient. Yeah.
Maybe in 1 minute before we take a short break, what is your relationship between those women and youth, because I was looking at a certain report that was indicating few registered women groups and have benefited from Women Fund, Enterprise, Ways of Fund. Women are committed to pay the loan, but when youth get those loans, they just walk away and they will not come back again.
Yeah.
So do you have the same problem?
So, so let me put it this way. I do know the report you're talking about. And that is why, for me, when it comes to youth, I started off with saying that I can give you an opportunity. Not money, but an opportunity. Because sometimes you want to make sure that you're working with a person or an entity who has a track record, right? So if it's someone without a track record, for me, I also have to protect myself in the sense that you don't want to give someone money and it's not going anywhere. What you start off with is giving them an internship, as opposed to now the female entrepreneurs who already have something they're showing you. Like, this is my business, I'm seeing it. That gives me the opportunity to then back that, because you're working with something that's there, right? And that's been the difference in approach. But I'd also like to say that in as much as I'm cautious, I don't want to kind of limit myself and be skeptical of all youth, because it's also important for us to be mindful that having a few bad experiences isn't reason enough for us to completely, remove the youth as a way of, creating change. It just needs, it needs a bit more time in terms of now probably a screening process to make sure you kind of know who is legit and who isn't. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. We take a short break. Nachukua break fupi na lejana mengi zaidi. Hii ni GBS TV Jumatatu. Mimi naitwa Ivan Kibe. Kumbuke kwamba nikimaliza mazungumzo haya nitakuwa najiunga na kiongozi wa wengi katika bunge la kaunti ya Kajiado, ambaye si mwingine anafahamika kama Mheshimiwa John Lemayan. Atakuwa anaingia hapa ndani ya mitabedi ya GBS TV Jumatatu. Naitwa Ivan Kibe.
Mambo mawili bro, 2 million or you go meet your creator.
Maskini sisi, corruption ya matajiri na si ya maskini sisi.
Hebu jitambulishe tukujue.
Naniita Zak mjuzi, mtu bila watu, wajanja, wana roho mbaya kama kisu cha bucha, heshima idumu. Hii ni Art Club, na Art Club tuna discover talent, tunazileta kwenu nyinyi ambayo ni wajanja, mnazipenda zile talent, mnazisupport, alafu talent zinakaa vizuri mjini.
Bila mapenzi bila do, mimi ni msanii bro.
What?
Bila mapenzi bila do, ni maisha ilambo, buskafidi mimecheki heri mimi sakedo, niko always on the low. Mimi ni msanii Mr. Zak mjuzi.
And then tunaweza fanya something basi.
Sure we can. Let's get it.
Si mfunguo.
No siniseti bro. Don't set me up.
If we want better societies, let us be open and willing to offer solutions.
My name is Mary Gaki or Mary Njero.
If you've ever met any video that starts with ladies, that is the man over here.
My name is Wycliffe Ithali. I am a psychologist and counselor.
If you're a believer, be the church. Don't go to church, but be the church.
Someone said that if you want to change the world, mentor a child.
Yeah. And one thing that I've grown to see, and every day it's happening in our community.
You learn how to communicate, because communication is everything.
Boys are brought up in a different way, or to believe things are different from their counterparts who are girls.
We are here to talk about youths. How does it affect the youths? How is it that youths wanapatana? Because this is not a joke, by the way. It's not a joke. It's not a joke.
Most of the time, people you are around with hawajui about mental health, hawajui how to support the people who are going through issues. We don't create that space where our friends can easily share with us stuff wenye inawasumbua.
Ya kwanza, nishaipiga makanga.
Hawajui strategies ya kukusaidia to cope with the situation you're in. So the only thing they will do, they will shun you, watakuhepa. You look like a plague.
But you know, trauma si kitu yenye unaweza heal, like you just grow with it. Inakujanga tu pole pole. Kuna time inaweza kaa usahau. Some point in life unafika mahali unasikia inazidi, inakuja tu abruptly hivyo. But tunajaribu tu.
Everywhere, GBS.
Karibu tena mtazamaji wangu wa GBS TV. Hii tunamalizia sehemu hii ya kwanza kwa dakika 15. Allow me to read some few SMS from Msizani Matata. Say hi to you. Watching us from YouTube. And he is asking that Kenya is a member of African Climate Change Summit, but being a member, if we are not getting support as we purport, do we need us to be a member we can drag out?
If I understood correctly, that's from a member of the African Union?
Yes.
So I think we are getting support because, number one, we chair the Climate Change Committee at the African Union. That's a very, very important role because it means in terms of leadership and direction of the continent, Kenya is actually guiding that. So I think it would be too early for us to pull out of the same. I think there's a lot of advantages for us to have that particular position. And I think we'll be better placed to know once we come out of this COP 28. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. We get back now to our conversation. Thank you very much, Msizani Matata. Okay, now somebody is asking some of the challenges that you are facing as you support these women and youth.
Oh, what are the challenges?
Yes.
Well, for starters, it's a very thankless job in the sense that sometimes you genuinely cannot give someone an opportunity. And they feel entitled to opportunities. So it's a very interesting space because you can genuinely say, unfortunately, you don't qualify for this opportunity. And they get upset because they want a job. And I understand that, and I don't take it personally in the sense that people want jobs, and jobs are an issue. So saying no to someone is often very hard because you're letting them down, and they have quite a bit of expectations. Yeah.
I like the way you have used the word often, and we know that the government is at cost to close the student centers maybe in the next 8 years.
Yeah.
What is your view on the same?
Well, I think it's really early for me to tell. I'd want to know if they would actually close them first, right? Because I don't want to comment on something until I see it materialize. I think at that particular point in time, then I can give a fair assessment. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Any strength that you feel that as you're doing this job?
Strength?
Any strength, any impact?
Oh, yes. No, definitely. I think one of the key things that I'm starting to see is people, when they feel that you genuinely do care about them, will engage you. And I think our challenge with our laws sometimes is because people feel, well, laws are not here to work for us, then even our public participation processes don't have good attendance. But the minute they feel either they're affected or they feel you care about the process, people do show up for public participation. That's what I've realized. And over time, I'm seeing the number increase, which means they're starting to think that someone on our end is listening to them. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Now we get down to the county government of Nairobi, where you belong, the member of county assembly. In the last 1 year, what can you see maybe the county government of Nairobi have achieved for its people?
So, well, I would say for starters, there's automation of certain services. So in that regard, definitely creates an avenue for, I would like to assume, better service delivery. Number two, there was also the Green Schools program, the school feeding program. And of course, there's good and bad in anything. So it's not perfect, but I think what its intention is to ensure that, you know, school kids have one decent meal a day, and that's, you know, commendable as an effort. The third, I think, is that Nairobi has managed to host 4 key regional and global events. I mean, the Africa Climate Summit, the Africa Climate Week, Africa Energy Forum, the UN Habitat General Assembly, for the world to see Nairobi as a hub of an opportunity, big enough for them to have that platform in Nairobi. That says that there is potential in Nairobi. And I would like to say that investors coming to Nairobi means that they're seeing opportunities in Nairobi. I'm just hoping that the government, in its wisdom, will utilize that to create that platform. Because the worst thing is, if we come out from having all these international conferences with nothing, we'll know by end of year if we really reach the benefit of it. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that. Last week, I think on Friday, the governor, Sakaja, approved the 2023-2024 Nairobi City County budget that accumulated to 42 billion, with an extra 17 billion that should come from, that will be financed by Nairobi residents. Do you feel that, based on how the economy is at now, do you feel that Nairobi residents will be able to finance 17 billion?
So I have my reservations around it. I have my reservations around it, but all in all, I think, for me, it comes down to what I said. If someone says they need money, I would want to see how they'll utilize it. So in another 6 or 7 months, if we see that budget, as indicated, actually delivers service for Nairobi, then I'd be able to back it. If it doesn't, then I would be able to question it, because, you know, given that it is, I think, pretty early on, it's hard for me to say it's a lot or a little, because on their part, they wanted more. On our part, we were pushing back as legislators. So 6 months later, I would have a more informed opinion on whether the money they requested is genuinely for the delivery of services. I'd like to think so for now, but definitely it's very steep, especially in the current economic situation. Yeah.
My question has come because it's for the first time that Nairobi is going for 17 extra billion. If you look for the past years, the target from Nairobi resident is 10, 12. It has never hiked to 17 billion.
Yeah.
And as if you look the economy how it is, as compared to the past years, the question begs, when was it necessary to raise 17 billion? During that time or this time, Mheshimiwa?
And that's precisely why I'm saying.
Yeah,
so we've been given this 17 billion. I think it's steep, but I don't want to say, and for that reason, it's unreasonable. I want to understand, if there's this ask of 17 billion, then it better ensure that we have adequate service delivery. And in 6 months, we would have seen whether that 17 billion was actually asked for the right reasons. Because you're right in saying that this is the highest figure so far. So my question is that figure because there'll be additional or very quality based services that we will receive as Nairobians? That time will answer for us. If not, then there'll be serious answers that the executive will have to answer to us, because where you ask, there's an obligation for you to fulfill. So I would encourage Nairobians to really keep track on this conversation, because with that additional 17 billion, especially in the market that we're operating in, we need to be mindful and accountable to where that is going. Yeah.
Mheshimiwa, you're in a very special position where you are dealing with the youth and women.
Yeah.
And most probably, those women and youth are the one are being targeted to list these 17 billion. It's a question of how much can that youth that you are helping now can contribute to 17 billion?
Let me start by saying that if we were to peg it on youth and women right now, it's an unreasonable ask, okay? Unless there's some sort of innovative way that I'm yet to be aware of. To me, it seems a very steep ask. Because as I said, these are women who need these micro grants to operate and create opportunities. You similarly are starting out and are trying to figure out their space in the professional world. So it's a very steep ask for them. So my curiosity would be, who is helping these two population sets help us get to the 17 billion? And so with that in mind, hence my comment around, I want to give it 6 months to know where this is coming from, because so far I'm unclear. I'm unclear on the ask and how that will be done. But as a legislator, my role is to hold someone accountable. So they've pushed for that. They probably will get it. They get it. When they get it, I want to see how they will show the accountability on it. Yeah.
Your party leader,
yeah,
Honorable Raila Amolo Odinga,
yes,
persistently has been fighting for the lives of people,
yeah,
and especially where the economic is not working for them. Being that there is a bipartisan talk, there are those who are feeling that we would wish also to hear his anticipation on this budget.
Answer your question. So are you asking if I agree with that view?
No, I'm asking, where is your party leader on this?
So the party leader is always going to be for devolution. Let me start there. And the party leader is also going to be for the people. I think he would have reservations. He would be happy that we finally got a budget sorted, because remember, the budget is what then allows the executive to implement its mandate. So in that regard, he would be happy that this process has concluded so that the work can begin, because so far, what we've heard as an assembly is work cannot begin if there's no budget. So now you have your budget, the real work begins, and we'll be here to hold you accountable on both fronts. The fact that it's steep, which is not reasonable, yeah, but also if you've given enough justification that it's needed, you better deliver. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Maybe we finish with this one where I know you are not a UDA member, but on December 9th they have planned and they are anticipated to have a party elections from grassroots to chairmanship at county level and maybe at the national level.
Yeah.
I know you have your friends who is vying. I always look at that position to be Nairobi chairperson, who is Mheshimiwa Anthony Kiragu. When you listen to your friends there, do you feel that he may be in that position? Maybe there is any other within the Nairobi County who is vying for that position of chairmanship?
Okay, so I think I'm not clear on who else is running for it, but in terms of specifically on Honorable Anthony Kiragu, I would say as minority leader, he's been very sober in his approach as a leader. I also think, given his experience as a legislator, I have seen that how he reasons and how he debates and legislates is something that I personally respect quite a bit. And so in that regard, being a sober individual and being a passionate legislator. Those two qualities will go a long way in my opinion, building a case for him. And he's also done quite a bit for the party in his capacity as a UDA member. So I think on my part, if I were to be a UDA advisor, I would say that definitely Honorable Anthony Kiragu is a solid candidate to consider for that position, because not only is he mindful and intentional, he's very strategic in his approach. And I think leadership is about strategy, and leadership is also about being persistent, and he's both. And so in that regard, I wish him well, and I and also wish all the other candidates well. But generally, in my opinion, he would be solid. Yeah.
Lastly, the World Green Building Council of Africa Regional Network. Where do you find a space where you can fit in Kenya?
So just to give you a little insight, so the World Green Building Council Africa Regional Network is a network of green building councils in Africa whose aim and mission is to champion sustainability in the built environment. Kenya, so I currently chair the Africa Regional Network at the World Green Building Council. And in that regard then pushed to have the built environment as a key track in the Africa Climate Summit, which was recently concluded. And there, we helped come up with the content around sustainable cities. And this is the first time that it's ever happened in a regional climate conversation. And the reason for this is important because often when we think about climate change, for whatever reason, we think of planting trees. That's not the only thing that climate change needs to tackle. Cities are a key game changer and should be looked at as an ecosystem of opportunities. If we protect our urban forests in a city, we're essentially saying we have carbon sinks in a city. If we plan our cities, we're creating spaces where communities then become key change agents in guiding a life of dignity, order, and hope, in driving now economic activity in the city, social activity where kids can play, cities are walkable, and that's a key challenge for a lot of African cities. Nairobi really struggles with being walkable. When it rains, all of us are hiding somewhere.
Sure.
Unfortunately, there's nowhere to hide, so you find a lot of us are rained on. So in this regard, essentially what I'm trying to do is to push and nudge and shape the conversation where cities or the built environment can help us with the climate conversation, because buildings account for about 39% of CO2 emissions. So if we get it right with buildings, if we get it right with the built environment, we've essentially won 40%. So we'll be left with 60, and that already puts you in a much better position.
15 billion trees as the way of combating the climate change. Do we have spaces to plant those 15 billion?
That's a good
as much
question.
now you're talking about Nairobi as a city.
Yeah.
Do we have those public spaces that we can plant those trees? Or maybe in Nairobi, how many trees out of 15 billion that the president is anticipating to plant?
That's a very good question. I think within the city, I think that would be a very interesting challenge. And perhaps one of the things that we need to start thinking about is, for all new developments, could we consider ensuring having green spaces for all new developments? Because that's one way we can help. Because along Kileleshwa, where I reside, by the way, there's just a lot of concrete. And I'm also seeing that the soil, which is rich and fertile, they're actually replacing it with cement, which is bad for us because it means there's no spaces to plant. So I would like to say that there could be, but change needs to happen at policy level to ensure any development needs to have a green space so that we can then plant those trees. Without doing that, it might be a challenge. Yeah.
Do you feel that 15 billion trees will be a game changer?
Definitely. I think they will do their part in helping with the CO2 aspect, but they don't happen in isolation. If you have lots of rapidly developed, growing cities and peri-urban areas, that would challenge that effort. So definitely on its own, I think it's a very commendable initiative, but it needs to be complemented with other things as well. Yeah.
Maybe now your partition, your overview of our discussion today.
So all in all, I'm really happy to have had this conversation with you. I think it marks an important shift in understanding that climate change is here and it's here to stay. But what's more important is how can we work together to ensure that climate change or climate action is also an opportunity for us as citizens to create green jobs, to have better green spaces. Essentially, for me, it's a wake-up call for us to be intentional in how we live, in how we work, in how we build. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let me say again, thank you for being with us this morning. As you endeavor to serve your people, we wish you the best. On behalf of GBS TV, I say thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Imekuwa hali na shwari kuwa na mheshimiwa Nasra hapa ndani ya GBS TV Jumatatu. Nachukua break fupi, nikirejea tena nitakuwa na kiongozi wa wengi kutoka kaunti ya Kajiado, anafahamika kama mheshimiwa John Lemayan. Nitakuwa naingia hapa hivi baada ya dakika chache. Usicheze mbali.